That night, the rain poured heavily, making the atmosphere even more chilling. I sat in front of the bedroom window, watching the raindrops fall like shards of glass behind the curtain. The ticking of the clock was clear, the only sound besides the heavy rain outside. It was 11 p.m., but my eyes still refused to close. I felt the cold air creeping on my skin, even though all the windows were tightly closed. An odd feeling began to creep in, like someone was watching from within the darkness. In the corner of the room, behind the large mirror facing my bed, a faint shadow appeared. I swallowed hard, trying to think rationally. It's just a shadow, a reflection of the outside light, I told myself. However, the longer I stared at it, the more real the shadow seemed. It wasn't moving, but it felt like there were eyes staring back from within the mirror. I heard a faint sound like a soft whisper coming from the mirror itself. My body tensed, my breath caught in my throat. Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered. Once twice and then went out completely. Pitch dark. Only the occasional flash of lightning outside illuminated the room. I tried to reach for my phone on the bedside table, but my hands were trembling, making it hard to focus. In the darkness, small footsteps could be heard, soft and hesitant, yet clearly approaching me. I knew I was alone in this room, but the sound was real. My heart raced, cold sweat began to bead at my temples. I mustered the courage to look at the mirror again. The shadow from earlier was now moving. Something in the mirror was coming out. I wanted to scream, but my voice was choked in my throat. The figure, human-like but with a blurred face, had no eyes, just dark voids that seemed to absorb all the light around it. The figure approached, its steps slow but deliberate, and I could feel the chill intensify with each step it took closer. I grabbed the door handle with trembling hands, but the door wouldn't open. It was locked. I don't remember locking it. My heart pounded louder. In desperation, I glanced back, hoping the figure was just an illusion, but the figure was now standing right in front of the mirror, half of its body already outside. Its pale, wrinkled hand reached out toward me, and a whisper was heard again, clearer this time. Come with me. I couldn't move. My legs felt rooted to the floor. The figure continued to approach, only a few steps away. Suddenly, the lights came back on. The room looked normal. The mirror reflected only ordinary shadows. But the figure had vanished. I remained still for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. My breath was still ragged, and my hands trembled. But when I looked at the mirror again, there were faint handprints on its surface, handprints that were definitely not mine. My heart was still pounding, not fully recovered from the terror that had just occurred. Although the figure had disappeared and the lights had come back on, the room felt different. The atmosphere was strange, as if something was lurking in every corner. The faint handprints on the mirror seemed to stare back at me, making my skin crawl. I tried to calm my breathing, reassuring myself that it was all just my imagination. But when my eyes were drawn back to the mirror, the handprints began to fade, as if being pulled back into the darkness that had just enveloped the room. With fear still gripping me, I decided to leave the room. I couldn't stay here any longer. I reached for the door handle again. This time, the door opened easily. I stepped out into the dark hallway, lit only by a small light at the end of the corridor. The sound of the rain outside was still clearly audible, its roar adding to the cold and frightening atmosphere of this old house. Each step I took felt heavy, as if something was holding me back. When I reached the end of the hallway, the eerie feeling returned. It was as if something was following me from behind. I dared not turn around, but I could hear faint footsteps, as if mimicking my own steps, rhythmic, yet separate. I quickened my pace, hoping it was just my imagination. But the footsteps matched my speed, getting closer. Finally, the sound stopped right behind me. Reluctantly, I turned around. There was nothing, just the empty, dark hallway. But in the corner of my vision, I saw a shadow, something tall and thin, moving quickly among the shadows. I couldn't make out what it was, but my heart was filled with an increasing sense of dread. Without thinking, I ran to the living room. Upon arrival, the atmosphere didn't feel any better. The house was old, filled with antique furniture and gold-framed paintings that seemed to watch every move I made. In one corner of the room, I saw a rocking chair slowly rocking by itself, even though there was no wind. This can't be happening, I whispered to myself, but everything in this house felt wrong. There was something hiding here, something that wanted to come out, like the shadow in the mirror. As I tried to calm myself, I heard another sound, like someone whispering my name from the corner of the room. I looked over, and in that corner, there was a figure hunched over, its body rigid, its face hidden in the shadows. But I knew it was watching me. Without a sound, it moved, its long, thin hand reaching out toward me. I backed away slowly, but the figure kept getting closer. My breath caught in my throat. I turned and ran as fast as I could, heading for the front door. As I reached the door handle, I heard the sound of the wooden door creaking behind me, as if someone was opening it, followed by heavy footsteps moving quickly toward me. I opened the front door and ran out into the rain. As soon as my feet touched the wet ground outside, I felt something holding me back. Not just fear, but something real. Something cold and invisible was pulling at me, preventing me from escaping. In panic, I glanced back into the house, and there, behind the half-open door, the figure stood. Its face was now clearly visible, pale, with empty eyes and a mouth forming a terrifying smile. Then it spoke, this time with a very clear voice. You can't leave. I screamed, trying to free myself from the invisible grip. With all the strength I had left, I managed to break free and fell to the ground. I ran without looking back, only accompanied by the increasingly heavy rain and the occasional roar of thunder lighting up the night. But I knew, since that night, something had followed me. Something from the mirror was no longer trapped in that old house. And I knew, sooner or later, it would come looking for me again. Days passed after that horrific night, but the shadow of what happened never truly faded. I left the old house, hoping everything would return to normal if I was far enough away. But even in a different place, I felt its presence, the figure, always there in the shadows, waiting for the right moment. My nights were now filled with nightmares. Dreams about the large mirror in my room that once again showed that figure, the eyeless entity with the terrifying smile. I often woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in cold sweat, feeling the cold air around me. Every time I looked into a mirror, whether in my room, the bathroom, or a store, I felt as though I was being watched. Faint shadows sometimes appeared in the corner of my eye, but when I looked, there was nothing there. But I knew it was there, waiting. One night, just as I felt I was beginning to forget the incident, I heard the whisper again. At first, it was soft, almost like the sound of the wind. But gradually, the whisper became clearer. You can't run from me. I got out of bed, feeling panic. The whisper grew louder. I ran to the bathroom, trying to wash my face with cold water to calm myself. When I looked into the mirror above the sink, there was nothing unusual, just my own reflection. But When I bent down briefly to grab a towel, I heard something that made my blood run cold. When I looked up again, the figure was in the mirror. This time closer, its face clearer, and the evil smile stretched across its pale face. Like in my nightmares, it looked at me with an empty gaze, but this time not just in the reflection. The figure moved. Its thin, pale hand reached out from the mirror, piercing the glass surface as if it were water. I backed away, but my body felt heavy. My legs were stiff, and I couldn't move to run. Its hand reached my shoulder, cold as ice, and a whisper filled my ear. I warned you, you can't run. In the final moments before everything turned dark, I felt my body being pulled toward the mirror. I wanted to scream, to shout, but no sound came from my throat. The world around me spun, and the mirror swallowed all my consciousness. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in the bathroom. I stood inside the mirror looking out into the world I once knew. But now I was trapped inside it, and from the other side, I saw my own reflection, or something resembling me. It smiled, with a very familiar grin. Now, I am the one trapped here, and the figure, which took my place, roams freely in the outside world. I can only watch from behind the mirror, powerless to do anything, waiting, and hoping that someday, I might be able to get out. But until that time comes, I can only whisper to anyone who looks into the mirror, just as it did to me. And maybe, one day someone will hear.